What's happening in the region is indeed affecting, I would say, economies and markets. However, it's all about the response of governments to the current turbulence and how we deal with it from a policy perspective. That's from the one hand, and the consistency of messages and policy as well being undertaken. So in the case of Egypt, we were very, how can I say, foreseeing that this conflict might be taking some time as opposed to initial expectations that it is going to end very soon. Accordingly, we took a very I would say, quick actions when it comes to rationing, increasing the energy prices across the different products that are being sold in the Egyptian market. And this is coming from a consistent fiscal consolidation policy. So we foresaw that these type of measures and these prices and what's happening in the natural gas prices, in the oil prices, would be having a detrimental impact on our fiscal deficit. And accordingly, we had to ration very quickly and to adjust the prices to reflect what is happening in the oil prices from the one hand. On the other hand, our response to the monetary policy regarding how we're dealing with these type of shocks and the absorption capacity of the economy, the flexibility that we have shown through the Central Bank of Egypt, of course, in terms of the effects to be absorbing some of these shocks, as well had a positive, I would say, impact in terms of conveying to the market the consistency of our reforms. We had embarked and clearly communicated to the public and to investors a couple of years ago or 2.5 years ago that we are inflation targeting. So inflation targeting implies that you need to be capable of using your other tools, such as interest rates, such as FX rates, to curb inflation in the medium term and to act as an absorption to the shocks that are happening. So energy for us, we're in a much better initial condition. We have regasification, I would say, ports in Egypt, one on the northern side and one on the Red Sea side, and hence we don't have a problem when it comes to availability. However, the costing, of course, had increased.
When it comes to the Red Sea, though, do you have contingency plans if, say, Bab el-Mandeb Strait gets closed by the Houthis?
It had happened before, so basically we deal with it as it happens. Of course, we work on eliminating or reducing the probability of this happening through political dialogue, diplomatic dialogues, and so on and so forth as much as we can. However, we have dealt with this before, and we get to see what is happening currently in terms of the shipments that are passing through the Suez Canal actually have been increasing and recovering gradually from previous halts in the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. So, yeah.
Lots of reports that it's not just Pakistan, it's Turkey and Egypt behind the scenes helping mediate between the United States and Iran. What has been your role exactly?
Well, as a Minister of Investment, I don't think I have a role here, but maybe the Minister of Foreign Affairs would be having I believe we have quite a good role when it comes to mediating between the different parties, trying to reach to a common ground regarding the ceasefire, regarding what are the next steps as well. So it's not only about the ceasefire, but the next steps after reaching to a point of conclusion so that we ensure it doesn't happen again. So I'm quite sure that the country itself and as well through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are doing quite a good communication, I would say, efforts and mediation efforts between the different parties associated. And probably it's not only Egypt as well, you will find Turkey as well part of the equation of these mediation efforts.
While you're here in Washington, D.C., how much are you looking to raise money in case the Strait of Hormuz is closed for, say, months, like an analyst who was just on seems to suggest?
Our aim today is basically one, of course, to be attending the relevant meetings and functions at the IMF World Bank, and the second target would be meeting investors, because this period is a convening period for all investors around the world to be participating in some of those meetings. So our target would be explaining to investors what have we done in terms of policy reforms, our consistency in the reform plan, irrespective of what's happening. We cannot be, how can I say, affected by interim problems that are going to happen when we get to see what's happening in the world, starting from emerging market crisis in 2019, COVID afterwards, Russia-Ukraine war, and so on and so forth. So basically we know that it is a current turbulent period whereby we need to be consistent in our reforms and not affected. We might have to fine-tune some of our reform plans, but it is consistent reform plans empowering the private sector, and that's why the recent figures, for example, of the private sector investments that grew from 40% of total investments in Egypt to around 58% during the latest quarterly figures. When we get to look at the industrial growth rate of the industry sector in Egypt, it grew by an average of 9% during the last 24 months. All of this resulted in a growth rate of 5.2%, which in itself is a driving force and attracting investors to participating in a young population. 70% of the population is under 40 or 35 years old, a vibrant economy, and so on and so forth.